Some children ask for toys. These triplets asked a homeless stranger to become their mother. A woman who had nothing was chosen by 3 children who had no one. One sentence from 3 shivering triplets shattered everything she thought she knew about herself. You need a home, and we need a mommy. Maria didn't know which part shattered her more, the innocence in their voices or the certainty in their eyes. It wasn't the kind of sentence children should say, especially not at 6 in the morning at a nearly deserted bus stop. But the 3 of them stood there, like tiny, trembling soldiers, letting their words land on her heart with the weight of a destiny she hadn't asked for. She pulled her torn coat tighter over herself. Sweethearts, you don't understand. I'm not someone who can take care of. You take care of people all the time, the smallest girl interrupted, chin tilted with stubborn bravery. We saw you last night. Maria's stomach twisted. Last night, she had given her last blanket to an older homeless man who couldn't stop shivering. She hadn't even known anyone was watching. The middle boy stepped forward. You covered him and told him the wind was getting worse. You said you'd be fine. But you weren't. His voice cracked. Maria swallowed hard. These kids shouldn't have witnessed that kind of desperation. They shouldn't have been awake at 2 a.m. They shouldn't have been here at all. She crouched to their level. Where is your father? The smallest boy, clutching the one-eared rabbit to his chest, didn't lift his eyes. Daddy went to heaven last night, he whispered, voice barely audible over the hiss of the approaching bus. Maria blinked fast, the world tilting slightly. Last night? You mean you were alone all night? They nodded in unison. Her breath hitched. It was impossible. They were so little. 7, maybe 6. Their backpacks looked heavier than their bodies. Their cheeks were windburned. Their shoelaces were uneven, tied with tiny hands that weren't used to doing it themselves. They were trying, she could see the effort, trying to be brave, trying to act like they weren't breaking. Where were you? Maria asked softly. In the shelter, the girl answered. But Daddy didn't wake up today. They took him away. Her little chest rose and fell quickly, the pain still fresh, too big for her small frame. They said someone will come talk to us. But no one came. We got scared, the middle boy added. So, we followed you when you left the blanket. Maria's throat tightened. They had followed her? Through freezing streets? Through the darkness? Why me? She whispered. The youngest boy stepped closer, placing his small, cold hand in hers. Because you look like you need us too. Her heart cracked open. You need a home, the girl repeated, and we need a mommy. No one had called her that word, not since the day she lost everything. Not since the fire that took her job, her apartment, and the child she was 5 months pregnant with. The pain was still there, tucked away in a corner she never let anyone see. She had spent 3 years believing she didn't deserve to be loved again. That motherhood was a blessing she wasn't meant for. But here were 3 children, unbroken by tragedy, even as they shook in the cold, offering her the very thing she had spent years mourning. Maria glanced at the bus that had now pulled up. The doors hissed open. The driver stared impatiently. Are you getting on? He asked. She looked at the kids. Where were you planning to go? The girl shrugged. We didn't know. We just knew we should find you. Maria felt something shift deep inside her, a stirring she hadn't felt since the day she lost her unborn child. A whisper that said maybe, just maybe, life was giving her one more chance. Kids, she said gently. I don't even have money for a bus ticket. The middle boy reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of coins. We have $1.83, he said proudly. We saved it for candy, but we think you needed more. Her eyes stung violently. No. She couldn't take that. She couldn't take anything from them. But then came the moment that broke her. The youngest boy lifted his one-eared rabbit and held it up to her. You can have Mr. Hops too, he said, voice brave but trembling. He helps when you're scared. Maria's breath escaped in a shudder. They were offering her their last comforts, their last scraps of security, their last childhood treasures. Because they believed in her. Because they chose her. Behind her, the bus driver sighed loudly and shut the doors, pulling away. The bus left a gust of cold wind that whipped at their clothes, scattering dust around their feet. The world quieted again. The girl looked up. "We don't want candy," she whispered. "We want you." Maria pressed a hand over her mouth, fighting a sob. She should walk away. She had nothing, no house, no food, no job. She wasn't stable. She wasn't safe. But love wasn't asking if she could. It was asking if she would. And the tiny hands holding hers were already giving her the answer. "Okay," she whispered finally, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Okay. I won't leave you." 3 little faces lit up, like sunrise breaking through a storm. And for the first time in years, Maria felt warm. A homeless woman thought she had nothing. 3 children showed her she already had everything she needed. They didn't have a house and she didn't have hope, but together they could build both. Some families are stitched together not by birth, but by a single moment of trust. Maria led them down the quiet streets, their tiny hands locked in hers, fingers trembling, but determined. She didn't know where she was going. The city seemed different in the morning light, less harsh, almost welcoming. But the weight of responsibility pressed down on her chest. 3 children.
No job.
No money. No plan. Yet somehow, in that moment, none of it mattered. The triplets chattered quietly, filling the spaces between the morning bus engines and distant car horns. Their words were small, practical, almost businesslike, like miniature adults trying to negotiate their survival. "We need breakfast," the middle boy said. "And then maybe a place with beds." Maria smiled despite herself. "Okay," she whispered. "We'll figure it out." They walked past familiar shops she had passed countless times, each window reflecting her reflection, ragged coat, unwashed hair, weary eyes. But today, 3 sets of eyes watched her with awe and expectation. She wasn't invisible anymore. Not to them. The girl tugged at her sleeve. "You're going to be our mommy?" Maria hesitated. Mommy. The word had once been sacred. Now it felt fragile, almost impossible. She knelt to meet their gazes. I don't know if I can be that for you," she admitted. "Then try," the boy said simply. "Please." They weren't asking. They were commanding, in that unshakable way only children who had lost everything could command. Maria felt a lump in her throat. They had been through more than most people did in a lifetime. And yet, they still believed in kindness, still believed in magic, still believed in her. They stopped at a corner cafe. The smell of coffee and warm bread hit her like a promise. She had no money, but the children's eyes were bright. They didn't need expensive food. They needed a warm start. "We can sit outside," she said softly. The girl shook her head. "No." "We'll stay together," she said firmly, holding their hands tighter. Maria looked at their tiny grips. They were stronger than she had imagined. She approached the counter. "Excuse me," she said, voice low, almost ashamed. "Could we maybe get some breakfast? I don't have much." The barista, a young woman with a kind smile, glanced at the children and then at Maria's coat. She didn't ask for money. She didn't hesitate. "Come on in," she said, gesturing toward the empty booth by the window. "It's on the house." Maria blinked. She wasn't used to kindness without strings. The children squealed quietly, barely able to contain their excitement. Pancakes, eggs, toast, simple, golden warmth on plates that somehow felt like hope. As they ate, Maria watched them carefully. The girl divided her toast, sharing half with the one-eared rabbit. The boy drank his hot chocolate slowly, savoring it like it was treasure. And the youngest boy kept glancing at her, studying her as if he was trying to memorize every line of her face, every freckle, every scar. "You'll need a bed," Maria said quietly after a while. "And maybe clothes that aren't," she trailed off, gesturing at their worn jackets and shoes that were 2 sizes too small. "We can help," the girl said. "We know how to share. And we can make it fun." Maria laughed despite herself. Fun. It felt like a foreign word. But maybe it wasn't impossible. After breakfast, they walked together to a nearby community center. Maria had passed it countless times, but never dared to enter. Inside, there were people who could help, shelter, guidance, resources. She signed them in, explained the situation, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was part of something bigger than survival. The triplets clung to her, whispering questions. Will we have beds? Blankets? Will it be warm? Each question was a thread pulling her closer to a reality she hadn't imagined she could have. When a kind social worker appeared, Maria felt her courage faltering. Could she really take on this role? Could she be someone's mother? But the children's eyes were bright, filled with expectation and trust. And in that gaze, she found her answer. Yes, she said. I'll do it. The words surprised even her. But the children erupted in quiet cheers, giggling and hugging her tightly. She laughed too, and the sound felt strange, almost foreign, until it didn't. Until it felt like home. Outside the center, the sun had climbed higher, casting golden light on their small faces. Maria looked down at them and realized something remarkable. She wasn't just leading them through the streets. They were guiding her too, showing her how to hope, how to care, how to trust again. For the first time in a long time, Maria allowed herself to imagine a future, not just surviving, but living. Not just existing, but belonging. The triplets didn't need a perfect mother. They needed someone who would try, someone who would stay, someone who would love. And somehow she could do that. Because they had chosen her. And sometimes that was all it took. Love doesn't need a perfect plan. It only needs a brave heart and 3 children daring you to try. She had nothing, but 3 little souls showed her that nothing could become everything. Trust is built in moments, not years, and they were building it together, one small step at a time. The shelter room was small but warm. Maria watched the triplets' eyes widen as they entered, their tiny faces pressed against the window pane, marveling at the soft beds, the colorful blankets, and the shelves full of toys they hadn't dared to imagine owning. Can we each have our own bed? The girl asked, clutching her rabbit tighter than ever. Maria smiled, feeling a strange lump in her throat. Yes, for now. We'll make this our little home. The children darted around, exploring every corner, their laughter echoing in the small space. Maria leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching them, heart swelling. She wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to having a family, or even the thought that she could belong somewhere. Mommy? The middle boy's voice stopped her. Yes. Will you stay? Maria's throat tightened. This question carried more weight than any she had heard in years. It wasn't about food or beds. It was about trust, about hope, about the courage to let someone into your life when you thought no one would ever need you. I promise, she whispered. That night, as the triplets slept in their tiny beds, Maria sat on a chair by the window, staring at the city lights. She had never felt so exposed, so responsible, yet so alive. 3 children were counting on her, and somehow that made her feel stronger, braver, more whole than she had in years. The first challenge came the very next day. Clothes. The triplets had outgrown everything. Maria had no extra money, and the shelter's donation closet was nearly empty. She spent hours scouring thrift stores, carefully picking out items that fit, or almost fit, wondering if she was doing enough. The smallest girl tugged at her sleeve. Do you like it? She asked, holding up a yellow sweater that was a little big but soft. Maria knelt down. It's perfect, she said, smoothing the fabric over the girl's shoulders. You look beautiful. The girl's smile was small but radiant. Maria realized then that it wasn't about the perfect sweater or the perfect meal. It was about presence, about showing up, about being consistent. That was enough for them. The middle boy discovered a love for drawing. Crayons and paper became his sanctuary, a way to express emotions he didn't have words for. Maria would sit beside him, tracing lines with him, marveling at the tiny world he created with each stroke. The youngest boy, shy and quiet, clung to Maria the most. At first, he barely spoke, preferring to observe the world from the corner of his eye. But slowly, he began to open up, telling stories about their father, about the games they used to play, about the songs their mother never got to sing. Maria listened, sometimes with tears in her eyes, but always with a hand resting gently on his small shoulder. Together, they navigated the smallest routines: meals, homework, hygiene, bedtime. Maria had no experience as a mother, but she learned quickly. Sometimes clumsily, sometimes with patience she didn't know she had. And the children adapted with a resilience that astounded her. They forgave her mistakes, celebrated her victories, and trusted her even when she doubted herself. One rainy afternoon, Maria took them to the park nearby. The children ran through puddles, screaming with delight, letting the rain soak them to the bone. Maria laughed too, letting go of her usual caution, letting the joy of the moment wash over her. "Mommy, we can make a home anywhere," the girl shouted, spinning in the rain. Maria's heart swelled. They were teaching her as much as she was teaching them. She didn't need a perfect apartment, a perfect life, or perfect plans. She just needed to be there, and that was enough. But life wasn't only sunshine and puddles. That night, as they huddled together under a blanket, the reality of their situation pressed down. Bills.
Food. School. Safety.
Maria had no permanent job, no savings, no idea how long they could stay in the shelter. Fear gnawed at the edges of her newfound hope. The triplets sensed it. "Mommy, are you worried?" the middle boy asked softly. "Yes," Maria admitted, holding them close. "But we'll figure it out. Together." They fell asleep with her arms around them, their steady breathing a rhythm that soothed her own anxieties. For the first time in years, Maria allowed herself to believe in the impossible, that a homeless woman and 3 orphan children could become a family. The next morning, she awoke to the sound of giggles. The children were already awake, brushing teeth, making small plans for the day. Maria realized something profound. They had given her purpose. Not in grand gestures, not in promises of wealth or success, but in the simple act of needing her, trusting her, loving her. She smiled, feeling a strength she hadn't known she possessed. Love wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, about staying, about being willing to be vulnerable. And these 3 little souls had chosen her to do just that. As they walked hand in hand to the shelter dining hall, Maria realized something extraordinary. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of tomorrow. Because, whatever came, they would face it together. And that was enough. Family isn't about what you have. It's about what you're willing to fight for. When the world pushes back, love becomes the fiercest weapon. 3 little children showed her the courage to face everything she had been running from. Life in the shelter had its rhythm. Alarm clocks, breakfast, school runs. But it wasn't perfect. Maria knew the stability was temporary. Every night, as she lay on the edge of her bed while the triplets slept, the fear gnawed at her. What if this all ended tomorrow? What if they were forced to leave, and she couldn't protect them? The first real test came when social services informed her that the shelter's limit was 3 weeks. After that, they would need a permanent residence or risk being placed in separate foster homes. Maria's heart plummeted. She had nothing. No savings, no job lined up, barely enough to feed herself. But she couldn't imagine her life without the triplets. The thought of them being torn from her arms felt unbearable. She left the shelter that afternoon, walking aimlessly through the city streets, the triplets trailing behind her like shadows. "Mommy," the girl asked, "are we going to lose this place?" Maria shook her head fiercely.
No.
"We're going to find a new home. I promise." But promises didn't fill empty apartments or pay for rent. Maria spent the next few days knocking on doors, calling landlords, pleading for any vacancy she could afford. Most responses were sympathetic but firm. "We're sorry, no openings," or "it's too small for 4 people." Each rejection weighed heavier than the last. The triplets sensed it. At night, they whispered worries under the blanket. The middle boy asked, "Mommy, will we be together?" "Yes," she whispered, forcing herself to believe it. "We will stay together, no matter what." One evening, desperate, she approached a rundown apartment complex she had passed countless times. The for rent sign was crooked, paint peeling. But inside, she found Mr. Coleman, the landlord, a gruff man with kind eyes. "I don't have much," she said honestly, "but I have 3 children who need me, and I need them. If there's any way, you could let us rent this apartment, I'll make sure it's perfect for you." He studied her for a long moment, then glanced at the children peeking from behind her coat. "You'll keep them safe, huh?" he asked gruffly. "I promise," she said. He nodded. "All right. But rent's due next week, and you'll need to get a job." Relief and fear tangled together in her chest. She had a place, but now the real challenge began: survival. Over the next days, Maria scrambled. She applied for every job she could find: cafes, cleaning, delivery, but nothing stuck. Exhaustion became her constant companion, yet she never let it show to the triplets. They had enough fear already. She smiled, cooked whatever she could afford, and tucked them into bed with bedtime stories, pretending that the weight of the world rested elsewhere. One rainy afternoon, Maria returned home from a long, failed job interview to find the triplets building a home in the apartment. Chairs were arranged as beds, stuffed animals lined up as roommates, and the three of them sat proudly, holding tiny cardboard welcome mats they had made. "They said we need to practice for when we have a real home," the girl explained.
See?
"We're ready." Maria laughed despite herself, tears spilling down her cheeks. They were teaching her resilience, courage, and hope, all without saying a word. But life wasn't going to pause for lessons. That night, as the wind howled outside, she counted the money she had saved from odd jobs. It was barely enough for rent next week. Anxiety clawed at her chest. "I don't know if we can do this," she whispered to herself. The middle boy, who had been eavesdropping, tugged her hand. "Mommy, we believe in you. You'll find a way." The youngest added, "We'll help. We can save our pennies." Maria smiled through her tears. They were right. Together they could face anything. The next morning, she'd double her efforts. She took on cleaning jobs at dawn, delivered groceries at noon, and worked part-time at a cafe in the evening. Exhaustion became a rhythm, but each paycheck, each small victory, brought her closer to keeping her promise. Meanwhile, the triplets adjusted to the new apartment with astonishing grace. They helped unpack, arranged their rooms, and even started a small garden on the windowsill. Maria marveled at their energy, their hope, their ability to turn a barren apartment into a home with just laughter and love. One evening, as she tucked them into bed, the girl whispered, "Mommy, we don't care if it's small. We just want to be with you." Maria's heart ached. She realized then that home wasn't about space or money. It was about love, presence, and commitment. And they had given her the courage to fight for it, to endure every hardship, to push forward no matter the obstacles. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a life not defined by loss, but by hope. Not by fear, but by love. And she knew, deep down, that whatever storms lay ahead, they would weather them, together. Sometimes, the smallest hands can change the largest hearts. A family isn't built in a day, but love can make it feel like it was always meant to be. She thought she had nothing, but 3 children proved she already had everything. The weeks blurred into months. Maria worked tirelessly, waking before dawn and returning late at night, exhausted but driven. Every paycheck went toward rent, groceries, and school supplies. Some nights she fell into bed fully clothed, too tired to even brush her hair, but she never let the triplets see her despair. She had made a promise, and promises, she now knew, were sacred. The triplets flourished. The smallest girl began excelling in reading, her voice clear and confident. The middle boy discovered a love for music, tapping rhythms on tabletops while humming songs he created. The youngest, once shy and withdrawn, grew bold, laughing easily and hugging Maria tightly whenever he felt uncertain. One Saturday morning, Maria was cleaning the apartment when she heard a flurry of excited whispers behind her. She turned to see the triplets holding an envelope, their faces shining with anticipation. "Mommy! Mommy! Look!" the girl exclaimed. Maria took the envelope gently, opening it to find a letter from the local social services office. Her heart thudded. She read aloud, "Maria Torres, in recognition of your dedication and the stability you have provided, your application for permanent guardianship of the children in your care has been approved. Congratulations. You now have legal custody of the triplets." Tears blurred her vision. She sank onto the couch, holding the letter close to her chest. The children crowded around her, their small arms wrapping tightly around her in a triumphant hug. "You're really our mommy now," the middle boy cried, punching the air.
Yes.
"Yes," the youngest squealed, holding Mr. Hops up like a trophy. The smallest girl pressed her cheek to Maria's. "We knew you would do it," she whispered. Maria sobbed openly, overwhelmed by relief, love, and a sense of belonging she had almost forgotten existed. She had fought, stumbled, and struggled through every obstacle, and now they were hers forever. That afternoon, they celebrated quietly in their small apartment. The children danced around the living room to the middle boy's drumming on the table, giggling as Maria clapped along. They didn't need decorations, gifts, or elaborate parties. Their laughter filled the room, filling every empty corner with warmth. Sitting on the couch later, Maria watched them as they played, her heart full. They had given her purpose when she thought she had none. They had given her hope when she had lost all faith. And they had loved her unconditionally, even when she doubted herself. She remembered the first day at the bus stop, the moment they had chosen her, and a smile spread across her tear-streaked face. They had saved each other, even without knowing it. Over the next weeks, life settled into a new rhythm. School mornings, homework, meal preparations, laughter, and bedtime stories filled the apartment. Maria found a steady job at a local community center, her heart swelling each day as she helped other children, always remembering the tiny hands that led her back to hope. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Maria tucked the triplets into bed. "Mommy," the girl whispered, "will you always be with us?" Maria kissed her forehead. "Always," she promised. The middle boy leaned in, holding her hand. "Even when we're big?" "Even then," she said softly. The youngest nestled into her side. "I love you, Mommy." "I love you too," Maria replied, pressing a gentle kiss to his hair. After turning off the lights, she sat by the window, looking out at the city that had once felt cold and indifferent. Now it felt alive, full of possibilities, full of the laughter and love of three small children who had changed her life forever. She had found a home, not in buildings or money, but in hearts. And in theirs, she had found herself again. The triplets had given her more than she could have imagined. They had given her a family, a purpose, and the courage to believe in herself once more. And Maria knew, without a doubt, that no matter what challenges the future held, they would face them together, as a family bound not by chance, but by love, trust, and the choice to stay. As the city lights twinkled in the distance and the soft hum of the evening filled the apartment, Maria closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt truly safe, truly loved, and truly home. She had been chosen. And in choosing her, the triplets had given her everything.